Once upon a time, there lived a very poor woodcutter and his two children, Hansel and Gretel. Their mother had died many years ago, and the woodcutter's second wife hated the children. She didn't want to use up any precious food to feed them, so she told the woodcutter to abandon them in the forest. "Your children eat up too much of our food," she shouted. "They would do better learning to fend for themselves in the forest. Take them far, far away from home so they can't find their way back." The woodcutter was a weak, scared old man, so he did as he was told. "Tomorrow, my love, I will take the children out into the forest." Hansel overheard his stepmother and her scheming. He knew he had to hatch a plan so he and Gretel would be able to find their way back home through the forest. He comforted his little sister. "Don't be scared, Gretel. I've got an idea to bring us back home safely," he said. He stole a slice of dry bread from the kitchen and tore it into little white pieces. The next morning, the woodcutter carried Hansel and Gretel deep into the tangled forest. Hansel carefully dropped a trail of breadcrumbs over his father's shoulder behind him. Looking out for the little white markers as they fell onto the path, after a few miles, he was aghast to see a little sparrow following close behind them, eating up all the breadcrumbs. When the woodcutter laid the children down in the forest and walked away, they were truly lost. All night they wandered around the creepy black forest, but found no food or shelter. Gretel cried, but Hansel tried very hard to be brave. On and on they walked, until suddenly they came upon a wide open field. In the center of the field there stood a strange little cottage, with a white picket fence and a column of smoke meandering out of the chimney. As the smoke drifted over the glade, it smelled like fresh baked cookies and warm apples. The brown walls of the cottage were covered in pink and yellow dots, and the awnings were carefully decorated with white piping. "It smells like gingerbread," said Gretel. "Gretel, I think it is gingerbread," cried Hansel. He took a big bite from the cottage wall. Sure enough, he tasted sweet, sugary gingerbread. The children tore chunks from the wall with their hands, stuffing pieces into their hungry mouths. A merry old lady appeared at the door. "Come in, kiddies, come in. I have plenty more treats inside, warm beds, and all the sweets you can eat." Hansel and Gretel screamed with delight and eagerly ran through the door. With a bang it closed behind them, and they heard the heavy clunk of a lock. The merry old lady transformed in front of their eyes to a wrinkly witch. She had a black hooded cloak, a hooked nose, and warts all over her face. The witch cackled and seized Hansel. "Yeah! I found 2 slaves. You'll be going straight in the cage, boy," she said, locking Hansel into a child-sized birdcage with thick iron bars. "I shall fatten you up until you're good enough to eat. And you, girl, you can do my housework, cleaning, washing, and feeding up the boy." The witch shackled Gretel to the ground with a long linked chain. The children could do nothing but cry. Hansel and Gretel were trapped for many weeks. Every day, the witch would demand that Hansel poke a finger out of his cage so she could see how fat he was getting, as she had very bad eyesight and couldn't get close enough to see for herself. Hansel was smart and had hidden a chicken bone in his cage from one of his meals. He would poke the bone through the bars instead, so the witch felt no fat at all. The day came when the witch was tired of waiting and decided to eat Hansel anyway. "Light the oven and get it nice and hot," she said to Gretel. Gretel was frightened, weeping as she left her scrubbing brush and bucket to light the oven. The witch crossed the room to check the oven temperature, but her bad eyesight hid the wet floor from view. Whoosh! The witch slipped on the soapy suds and fell headfirst into the baking oven. Inside, she burned to a cinder in moments. The day came when the witch was tired of waiting and decided to eat Hansel anyway. "Light the oven and get it nice and hot," she said to Gretel. Gretel was frightened, weeping as she left her scrubbing brush and bucket to light the oven. The witch crossed the room to check the oven temperature, but her bad eyesight hid the wet floor from view. Whoosh! The witch slipped on the soapy suds and fell headfirst into the baking oven. Inside, she burned to a cinder in moments. Gretel unlocked Hansel's cage, and they stuffed their pockets full of the witch's ill-gotten jewels and treasure. They filled a large basket with food and set off into the forest to search for the way home. Luck was with them. On the third day of searching, they found their father wandering through the forest looking for them too. "Your horrible stepmother has died. Come home with me now, my dear children, and I promise we shall never be unhappy again." The children hugged the woodcutter, and they all lived happily ever after.